He just turned 100 years old, a full century, and Dick Van Dyke is still the same guy who tap danced across our screen, made us believe chimneys were fun, and proved that growing old doesn't mean growing boring. But behind that million-watt smile and those legendary dance moves, there's a story most people have never heard. A story about sleeping in cars, burning Jaguars, terrible accents, and a love that defies every Hollywood cliche. This is the real Dick Van Dyke. Buckle up. At number 10, he evacuated from a wildfire at 99. December 2024. Dick Van Dyke is 99 years old, living in his Malibu home, probably singing with his wife, maybe doing a little soft shoe in the kitchen. Then the wildfires came, the flames tearing through California like they do every year now, only this time they're heading straight for his neighborhood. At an age when most people would need serious help just getting to the car, Van Dyke had to pack up and leave everything behind. Evacuate. Again. Because this wasn't even his first brush with California trying to kill him. But we'll get to that. The point is, the man's nearly a century old, and Mother Nature is still throwing punches. And he's still dodging them. Still standing. Still smiling. That's not luck. That's pure stubbornness wrapped in optimism. At number 9, he started out as a mime. 1947. Dick Van Dyke is barely out of his teens, and he's not on television. He's not in movies. He's in dingy nightclubs with a partner, performing something called the Merry Mutes. It's a pantomime act. They don't speak. They don't sing. They lip sync to old records and move around like silent film stars, making people laugh without saying a word. For 6 years, this is his life. Smoky rooms, drunk audiences, the same routines over and over. But here's the thing. That's where he learned to move. That physical comedy, that rubber-faced expressiveness, the way he could trip over nothing and make it look like poetry, that came from being a merry mute, from learning that your body can tell a story louder than your voice ever could. The greatest dancers and comedians all have origin stories. Van Dyke's just happened to be silent. At number 8, his ancestors came over on the Mayflower. Dick Van Dyke's family tree doesn't just go back a few generations. It goes back to 1620, to the Mayflower, to a passenger named John Alden, one of the original settlers who landed at Plymouth Rock and helped build America from scratch. Dutch, English, Irish, Scottish blood all mixed together, and somehow it all ended up in Danville, Illinois, where young Dick grew up alongside future stars like Donald O'Connor and Bobby Short. The odds of that? 3 future entertainers in the same small-town high school? It's like the universe was setting up a variety show before any of them even knew what a variety show was. But that Mayflower connection? It's a reminder that Van Dyke isn't just Hollywood royalty. He's actual American legacy, passed down through centuries, dancing all the way. At number 7, he played 2 characters in Mary Poppins, and one was a secret. Everyone knows Bert, the chimney sweep with the terrible accent and the charm that could melt glaciers. But Van Dyke played someone else in that movie, Mr. Dawes Sr., the ancient, crotchety banker who runs the bank and looks about 200 years old. Van Dyke was 38 when he filmed it. They buried him under makeup, prosthetics, a wig, and a fake nose, and then they credited him in the end titles as Nav Kid Keyed, an anagram, a puzzle, a joke hidden in plain sight. And now he's actually 100. He's lived long enough to become the character he once had to fake. The irony is so perfect it almost feels scripted. Somewhere, Walt Disney is laughing. At number 6, he married a woman 46 years younger than him. 2012. Dick Van Dyke is 86 years old. Arlene Silver is 40. They get married. The internet loses its mind. 46 years. That's not an age gap. That's a generation and a half. But here's what people don't know. When they met at the SAG Awards in 2006, Van Dyke had no idea how young she was. He just thought she was beautiful and funny, and they clicked. She's a makeup artist. He's a legend. And they sing and dance together almost every day. Not because they're trying to prove something, Because they're happy. She keeps him young, he says. And honestly, look at him. It's working. At number 5, he danced barefoot in a Coldplay video at 98, 2023. Dick Van Dyke is 98 years old. Most people that age are thrilled if they can walk to the mailbox. Van Dyke, he's starring in a Coldplay music video, barefoot, dancing, singing with Chris Martin in his Malibu home. The song is called All My Love. Spike Jonze directed it. 7 minutes long, and Van Dyke moves like he's still got springs in his shoes, like gravity forgot to send him the memo that he's almost a century old. The video dropped just before his 99th birthday, and the message was clear. This man will never stop performing. Ever. Because performing isn't what he does. It's who he is. At number 4, he became the oldest daytime Emmy winner ever at 98. 2024. Dick Van Dyke wins a daytime Emmy for a guest spot on Days of Our Lives. He's 98, the oldest winner in the history of the award. He gets up on stage and the first thing he says is a joke. If I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. The room explodes, because that's Van Dyke. Self-deprecating, sharp, still the entertainer, still the guy who knows how to land a punchline. 98 years old. And he's winning awards, making people laugh, proving that talent doesn't have an expiration date. The Emmy sits on a shelf somewhere next to decades of other trophies. But this one feels different. This one feels like a victory lap. At number 3, his Cockney accent in Mary Poppins is considered the worst of all time. 2017. A poll of actors votes Dick Van Dyke's Cockney accent in Mary Poppins as the worst British accent by an American in the history of cinema. The worst of all time. And Van Dyke, he apologizes. Publicly. He says he's sorry for inflicting the most atrocious Cockney accent in movie history on the people of England. But then he throws in a detail. The dialect coach they sent him. Irish. The guy teaching him Cockney was Irish, and his Cockney wasn't much better. So it was the blind leading the blind. Except both of them were Americans and Irish, and neither of them had any business being near a London accent. It's been over 60 years. People still roast him for it. And honestly, he deserves it. But we love him anyway. At number 2, he was pulled from a burning car on the freeway. August 2013. Dick Van Dyke is 87 years old, driving his Jaguar on the Ventura Freeway. And then the car catches fire. Not a little smoke. Flames. Real. Actual. This car is about to explode in flames. A guy named Jason Pennington sees it happen, pulls over, runs to the car, and drags Van Dyke out. Saves his life. The Jaguar burns to a crisp on the side of the road. And what does Van Dyke do? He goes home, takes a picture of the charred wreckage, and tweets, "Used Jag for sale, real cheap." 2 exclamation points, because of course. Because even when he almost dies in a fireball on the freeway, his first instinct is to make a joke. That's not bravery. That's reflex. That's a man who has spent 100 years turning every disaster into a punchline. And at number 1, he got married on a radio show because he was too broke for a wedding. 1948. Dick Van Dyke and Margie Willett are in love. They want to get married, but they have no money. 0. They can't afford rings. They can't afford a ceremony. They can't afford anything. So they do the only thing they can think of. They go on a radio show called Bride and Groom. The show pays for everything. The rings, the honeymoon, the household appliances, everything. In exchange, they get married live on the air for entertainment. And even after that, they're still so broke they have to live in their car for a while. Think about that. The man who would become one of the biggest stars in the world, who would dance with Julie Andrews and win Emmys and make generations laugh, started out sleeping in a car with his new wife because they couldn't afford an apartment. That's not a Hollywood fairy tale. That's real life. That's grit. That's the kind of origin story they don't put in the biopics. Dick Van Dyke just turned 100. A full century of pratfalls and punchlines, of terrible accents and perfect timing, of burning cars and burning passion for the work. What ties all these stories together isn't luck, it's relentless optimism. It's the refusal to quit, to slow down, to let age or disaster or bad reviews or terrible dialect coaches stop him from showing up and doing the thing he loves. He started in silence. He survived in fire. He danced into his 90s and married into controversy, and won awards into his late 90s, and evacuated wildfires at 99. And through it all, he kept smiling.